If you haven't ever really considered future generations, it's kind of amazing when you do take a step back and think, wow, this is something I've never thought of before. And this is something where I could have a really big impact because it's really neglected. I mean, it's really, really hard to reliably know if you're having a positive impact on the future, but it's hard, but it's worth doing.
G'day folks, and welcome back to Giving What We Can, where we explore how to use our resources to do the most good. In this episode, I'm joined by Simran Dhaliwal, the co-CEO of Longview Philanthropy. Longview Philanthropy is a non-profit organisation who design and execute bespoke giving strategies for major donors. Their grant recommendations are driven by the conviction that we can use evidence and reason to find the highest impact opportunities in the world. In this episode, Simran provides an overview of their grant-making work, the problems they're working to solve, and shares a bit about her journey to effective giving. So without further ado, here's Simran. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. It'd be great if you could start by just telling us a little bit about yourself and the work you do at Longview.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm Sim. I'm the Managing Director at Longview Philanthropy. We're an advisory and grant-making organisation, a long-termist grant-making organisation. And a bit about me. I came across EA in sort of 2011. So I was at Oxford doing my undergrad. And I actually went to a Giving What We Can talk, which was, I think, my first exposure to EA ideas. And it just really, really resonated with me. And then from there, became more part of the community.
You said that Longview is a long-termist grant-making organisation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been around for about 4 years now. And historically, we've done long-termist grant-making in areas like AI safety and biosecurity, and we're really expanding our grant-making now. So we're kind of expanding the team, and we've got Tyler John, who leads on our Global Priorities Research grant-making. We've just recently launched a nuclear security grant-making program, so we're actually hiring for that now. So we've got Carl Robichaud, who was a nuclear grant maker at Carnegie. He's joining in September, and so we're hiring someone to run the program with him. And our CEO, Natalie Cargill, is leading long-termist media grant-making projects, so we're really expanding the grant-making we're doing.
So are there any other projects that you're working on that you're really excited about?
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to grant making, we also run events, and we've just actually made some really exciting new events hires, which is great. So we run kind of smallish retreats for highly influential decision makers. So last November, we ran a 70-person retreat, and we brought together kind of policymakers, including people from the OECD and the UN. We brought together academics and EA experts, so Will and Toby, and people from Open Film, and communicators, so top YouTubers, best-selling authors, and then major philanthropists, and bringing those people together to kind of socialize long-termism amongst really important decision makers, because I think you've got really, really amazing projects happening, but it's how do we convert that to action, and how do we make sure people in positions of influence are hearing about long-termism in a kind of high-fidelity way. So we also run retreats, and we plan to run retreats to support our grant making also. So running kind of a retreat on media grant making. So bringing together people in the media field and people who are thinking about ideas, potentially for our new grant making areas. So our events team might assist Tyler in running a global priorities research retreat, or when our new hire starts in the nuclear space, running a nuclear security retreat, so we can bring together major players in the field and make cool things happen.
Amazing. Very exciting stuff. If you were speaking to someone who's completely new to long-termism, how would you pitch the idea of the importance of it and the work that you do and how that can have that impact?
So I guess we all came from different backgrounds at Longview. So I initially was really, really excited about the work that people are doing in global health and well-being. And as I learned about long-termism, sort of back in 2014, 2015, about the idea that the future could be really vast and really wonderful, and there are all of these future people, and they matter morally. And I think once you kind of sit with that idea and it resonates with you and you think future people do matter, you realise there's a huge obligation kind of now to do things to safeguard those future generations and not only make sure they exist, but make sure it's a really flourishing, wonderful future. And I think it's really, really neglected. So if you look at the field of AI safety, I guess there are like many thousands of people working to make AI more advanced, but there aren't so many people working to make sure it's safe and aligned with human values. So that's just kind of one example of where the impact could be really large, but it's pretty neglected, basically. And so I was really convinced by these arguments. And when Natalie founded Longview and invited me to join her, initially it was really scary because it was leaving my kind of job in finance to do this small startup, but they were amazingly successful in their first year, and I was really, really excited to join. And it was really, really motivating to get to work on the thing I really, really cared about. And so how we try to have an impact in practice is to fund, people, projects, organizations that are really dedicated to safeguarding future generations. So perhaps they're working on a research project to try to understand a problem better to inform the field. Maybe they're running conferences to bring together experts in the field to make sure they're understanding each other when they talk about things in their field. Maybe that's building a certain type of like technology or screening processes to make technology more safe. Or teaching buyout. If you've got an academic who's really dedicated to global priorities research, but they've got loads of teaching to do, can we buy them out their teaching so they can do more research in GPR? So really, really wide variety of projects, but it's really exciting that we are in a position where we get to support those people doing those projects.
Yeah. So it would be really great to hear about the experience of working with the donors who are interested in supporting long-termist projects and how that experience has been.
We're really, really lucky to work with the people we get to work with. So we're a very small team, so we focus on working with ultra-high net worth individuals and foundations, and they typically tend to be sort of self-made entrepreneurs. So these are people who are really exceptional, who've built their own kind of fortune, and then are really looking to give that away. So we're very, very lucky to get to do that. Some public people that we work with, so we do Sam Harris's philanthropy, we do Lincoln Quirk's philanthropy, and a bunch of other individuals too. And we also work with some of the big foundations. So it's brilliant to get to work with these people who have made a lot of money and then want to give it away. And these people generally are really excited about the potential for safeguarding future generations.
Are there common motivations you hear from people about how they got to that position?
I think it really varies. Some people we meet are really early on their EA journey. So sometimes we meet people who are introduced to us by someone in the EA community and say, hey, like this person is thinking about giving, they can give on a pretty large scale, but they're interested in EA ideas, but they haven't heard very much. And then our CEO, Natalie, she will take them through the kind of philosophical and practical underpinnings of like what informs EA thinking and what informs long-termist thinking. So sometimes we take them on that journey of introducing them to long-termism and long-termist concepts and all of the different cause areas and what cool projects are happening in those spaces. So often we introduce them to the ideas. And I think then often it's like a light bulb thing of, if you haven't ever really considered future generations, it's kind of amazing when you do take a step back and think, wow, this is something I've never thought of before. And this is something where I could have a really big impact because it's really neglected. I mean, it's really, really hard to reliably know if you're having a positive impact on the future, but it's hard, but it's worth doing. So that's kind of one motivation. And some people, some people say, oh, I read Nick Bostrom's paper, and you're like, great, okay, you're going to be very easy to work with. So, yeah.
Have you found that there are sometimes resistance with people who've come to work with you with a particular idea of what might be happening, and you have to coach them through that more?
We haven't had that problem particularly, no, because I think the people we tend to work with are really, really open-minded. I think to take long-termism seriously, you have to be willing to be pretty open-minded and think about ideas you maybe haven't thought of before. So we haven't had that much resistance. Something we do have sometimes is people coming in saying, I really, really care about climate change, or I really care about issue X, and we say like, that's awesome, that's a really, really important area. Have you thought about these other areas? This is why we think this is especially neglected and that area is important, but this is kind of what we do, and we don't really deviate too much from what we think is the most important, most impactful work.
So you mentioned earlier that you started off caring a lot about global health and development and focusing on that as one of the world's most pressing problems. Over time, you shifted to focusing on the long-term future. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that's quite consequential that you have changed your mind about in the last year or so?
Yeah, so I guess on that change, I mean, I think the work that people are doing in global health and development is really, really exciting, and I'm really excited for more people to support that. So yeah, historically, and it was kind of easy from my perspective when I was working in finance. I could just give to GiveWell Maximum Impact Fund or give to the GiveWell top charities, and that felt like an awesome thing to do, and that felt really fulfilling. And then, yeah, as I learned more about the ideas, I felt like on the margin, the long-termist work was more neglected. And that was like, yeah, I guess a quite big shift. In the last year, I think in the last year or 2 years, I guess one thing that I've changed my mind on in terms of leading Longview is hiring. So we've been around for 4 years. We're currently a team of 6, so we're very small and we've done a lot. And I think there was a lot of advice around hiring very slowly and being very cautious. I think I probably took that advice too much to heart, and I'm very much looking forward to growing a lot this year, and we're hiring a lot. I think we've already have 5 hires confirmed, and we've got 3 jobs that are live. And yeah, so I think that we have really, really big ambitions. And I think it's making sure you've got enough and the right staff in place to meet those ambitions, rather than having the kind of staff you do have who are extremely dedicated making that happen. It's knowing when to expand. So that's something I've really updated on.
You've been involved in effective altruism and effective giving for quite a number of years. What are some changes that you've seen that you think are really great, and what are some things that you're tentatively worried about but see like paths forward that could be really good if we take the right path?
So I think I'm really, really excited about the new funding landscape. I think there's so much opportunity. This is a community of extremely dedicated altruists. And I love coming to EA Global because you're just surrounded by awesome people who are really, really trying to make the world better. I find it really inspiring to be here. And it used to be the highlight of my year. So back in 2015-16, I remember wondering if I'd get into the EA Global in 2015 and was so thrilled to get in. So I think this community is really special. And I'm really excited that we have more resource to do things to make that change happen. I guess there is a bit of me that is concerned with all of this, and this is kind of really reflected in Will's opening talk at EA Global this year, of being ambitious but understanding the responsibility that comes with that, and making sure that we still hold ourselves to really high standards in the projects that we run, and making sure people are still really doing this for the right reasons. And I think they will be, but that's just something that I hope we keep our eye on as a community.
You're someone who's taken the Giving What We Can pledge and have donated a lot yourself over the years, but you also work with large donors. As someone who is familiar with both perspectives, what's the difference that small donors can have, and particularly their point of advantage compared to large donors?
I think this is a great question, and so I think it depends what your giving looks like. I think if you're giving in the global health space, every dollar you give, or every $5,000 you give, you're having a real impact to the life of somebody alive today. And I think that just doesn't really diminish. So I think that your dollars are just as impactful as a dollar from a major donor. So I kind of feel like in that space, you can just kind of continue to give well in their most impactful charities and feel really good about that giving. And that's I think probably what I would do if I was in that position. I guess in the long-termist space, it's a bit more difficult because you've now got very, very large donors who can fund these very large projects. And I think that if you are in the EA community and you kind of have a network and you understand, who's starting cool projects and what people are working on, I think you might be well positioned to see an opportunity. And if you've kind of have your annual pot of your 10% or more that you're looking to give, you might be able to see an opportunity and act really quickly in a way that the other kind of big grant-making organizations like Longview or Openphil are not. You might see smaller opportunities. So this person needs $5,000 to get this project off the ground. That's my annual pot. I can make that happen. And I think that seeing those opportunities and being able to fund them could be, it's a really valuable part of the ecosystem, I think, for smaller donors to fund. Me, myself, I'm just going to put into the Longview pot because I see our grant makers. I think they're excellent, and that's kind of where my donations will go because I get to see the amazing work they do. And yes, it's a drop in the ocean versus the donors that we work with, but I'll keep some back for exactly that. Where if I see a project where I can just make it happen really, really quickly, then I keep some back to allow myself to do that.
Yeah, wonderful. What's the plan for growing Longview Philanthropy over the coming years? I know there's a lot of growth at the moment. It'd be really great to hear about where that's all heading. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I could just talk about Longview all day. Longview is a really exciting point. So our kind of strategy for this year is to increase our focus on grant making. The second pillar of our strategy this year is make it the best place to work in the world, which I think is my job. And the third pillar is to hire to make 1 and 2 happen. So in terms of expanding our grant making, we've got 2 jobs that are live right now. So we've got a generalist long-termist researcher, and they'd work alongside my colleague Kit Harris. And we're looking for quite an active grant maker in that space, and they could specialise in a specific field if they've got a particular background. But that's kind of looking for someone who's really excellent, really understands long-termism, and can make grants in any one of those areas. We're also looking for a specific nuclear security co-lead. So we've had a great luck, and we've managed to hire Carl Robichaud. So Carl spent 13 years at Carnegie as a nuclear program officer there, so a grant maker at Carnegie Foundation. And he's been in the field for sort of 20, 30 years. So he's really well established, excellent communicator, really well connected in the field. I think he was an advisor for Toby's nuclear chapter in the Precipice. So he's been involved in the EA community for a number of years. He's starting at Longview full-time in September, which is very, very exciting. He's also extremely lovely. He's currently on a world tour with his family. So I think they're in Egypt. They've just been going up the Nile. He's got 3 young kids. So he's really wonderful, and I can't wait for him to join. And it's looking for someone to work with Carl and to build that nuclear security program. So to really decide, what is the strategy we want to have in this space, and then communicating that strategy to people to make those projects happen. And we're not sure what that strategy is going to be yet. But what we're looking for there is someone who really gets long-termist considerations and can understand how work in the nuclear field not only impacts the nuclear field, but how it interacts with other existential risks. Yeah, so we're really excited to fill that role. There's been a lot of changes in the nuclear security field. I mean, it's obviously very topical right now. But last year, MacArthur Foundation, which is I think it was sort of depending on the measure, almost half of the nuclear security funding in the space. So they've exited. So they've got a 3-year capstone grant. They'll be paying out their last grants in 2023. So that there was a void in the field. We've been involved in the field for a number of years because we're part of the Peace and Security Funders Group, and that brings together, all the major foundations. So Carnegie, MacArthur, Skoll, Rockefeller, Ploughshare, so all of the big funders. And we're part of a nuclear security working group, which we kind of snuck in because we weren't really doing that much nuclear security grant making, but I really wanted to learn from all the major foundations. So we were in that conversation. We learned about MacArthur exiting the field, and we had a time of reflection saying, is this time for EAs to step up and get involved in the field? It hasn't been as much of a focus for EAs, but we could potentially do a lot of good and we could potentially learn a lot. So we were actually, putting this plan together late last year. We worked with Damon Binder at FHI alongside Kit Harris, and Carl was an advisor. And as we worked together more, we decided we would launch the nuclear security program. We've made one grant to the Council on Strategic Risks. That was a 1.6 million grant over 2 years. But I think we're really going to wait for further grants until our kind of strategy is in place. So that's a really exciting role we're hiring for. They're both live now. They're both on a rolling basis, so they don't actually have a deadline. We're just going to wait to find the right person. And the third role, which I'm really excited about, is an executive assistant to the CEO. So our CEO, Natalie Cargill, she's brilliant. I'm very biased because we're also very good friends, but she's brilliant. She founded Longview from nothing, and she sets the strategy, and she's the visionary behind the organisation. She deals with all of our kind of key stakeholder relationships. So all of the philanthropists we work with, all of the big stakeholders we work with. She's the kind of main point of contact. She's also spinning up a media grant making program, and that's kind of thinking about what ideas do we want out there and how do we make that happen. So one example of an idea that we might want to be more prevalent is moral circle expansion. So, the idea that over time we've really expanded our moral circle to non-human animals and to women and to people of colour, and what are the next steps? And one might argue that future generations is kind of the next step there. And this is an idea that seems kind of robustly good. And so how do we get that idea out there? There are lots of ideas like this. That's just one example. And she's kind of learning about the space, learning about things like, how do Hollywood blockbusters get made? How do Netflix documentaries get made? Books, op-eds, YouTube videos, podcasts, and all of these different forms of media, and what tools can we use to share these ideas with more people? So that's really, really exciting. I mean, I think it's in a lot of ways the most exciting grant making area we're working on now. But we have to take it really seriously, because if you're thinking about messaging, that's really important. There's lots of things you have to consider there. So this person would work extremely closely with Natalie. The dream is that they become a hive mind, basically, and they would be helping Nat with her kind of daily communications, with like research ahead of meetings. So she's meeting with the head of like this very important production company, researching how not only into that person, into that organization, but how does that fit in with our work? What are their recommendations on what she should focus on? So I see this role as potentially a very, very rich one, and where the ideal candidate is working with Natalie and potentially even shaping how some of these projects go. So I'm very, very excited about that role. Later on in the year, we are probably going to be hiring for research assistants. So growing the team significantly this year.
Amazing. Well, this has been really fascinating. I really appreciate your time. Before we finish off, it would be really great to hear what are the asks you might have for anyone listening to this. We've already talked about hiring, but if there's anything else that you'd like to finish off with.
Yeah, so I guess for those in the EA community, if you happen to know an ultra high net worth individual and they might be open to giving, then always feel free to introduce them to us, and we'll try to take the time and educate them about EA and long-termism, and assist them with their grant making. Otherwise, I think, just keep an eye out for roles that we've got. And I would just be really, really encouraging, I guess, to give some kind of context on what we're really excited about is people with kind of experience. So if you're like a young and enthusiastic EA, I think there's this real drive to immediately be having impact. And I kind of just want to say it's okay to go and get some experience first. So go and work at a startup and learn, the inner workings of a really ambitious organization, or go and work at a professional organization and take some learnings there, and be okay with the fact that you might not be having direct impact for the first few years of your career. But then when you join an EA organization or you do more direct work, you'll be even better placed to do that. Because I think we find a lot of EAs fresh out of university really wanting to do work, and they absolutely shouldn't feel disappointed if they don't immediately land at an EA organisation. So that would be kind of one message I've got for people.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been lovely chatting. Really great to hear about the work that Longview is doing.
Great. Thanks so much, Luke.
Cheers.